Injuries are becoming a huge part of the season for the San Francisco Giants, and it's like whack-a-mole. They get somebody back, and somebody else goes down. In this case, Mike Yastrzemski comes off the injured list. That's great. But oh, by the way, Thairo Estrada, when he was hit in the hand by a pitch in New York in the finale, he broke it.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show, we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And coming up on today's show, the first thing we got to talk about is that the Giants lost arguably their best player to an injury. The good news is, this is a weird thing to say, but like if you have an Aaron Judge or something on your team who's, a Shohei Ohtani, to say, oh, we lost our best player is more impactful than losing Thairo Estrada. But at the same time, losing Thairo Estrada is impactful because the options that they have to replace him are, unproven as successful major league players, and that currently the Giants are not playing well. They lose another game last night, which we'll get into the specifics later, but they have lost 2 series in a row, and now they lose the opener here, and also just the injuries are piling up, and it seems like when they're able to get somebody back, somebody immediately goes down, and that was the case last night with, thankfully, Mike Yastrzemski being activated off the injured list, and Michael Conforto, who's been dealing with a hamstring thing himself, both Yaz and Conforto. Conforto was able to return to the lineup as the designated hitter, but then there's all these ripple effects there that's moving currently Jock Peterson, right? I mean, if Conforto is DHing, then Peterson is not, and that means Peterson has been playing in the outfield, which, he did pretty well actually in Toronto. In one of those games, he was all over the place, making some incredible plays, but long term, I mean, we saw last year that was a problem. And so there are all these ripple effects. And it's not just Thairo Estrada who's injured. You've also got Mitch Haniger, obviously. And then it puts, I don't want to say pressure, but it's, if you're a glass half full kind of person, you can say that these injuries have created opportunities for guys like Luis Matos and now, probably at second base, Casey Schmidt. He's starting there tonight. He started at shortstop last night. Brandon Crawford is dealing with a little bit of a side issue, but it doesn't seem to be very serious. It's kind of like ribs as opposed to an oblique. But so it's creating opportunities for these young players, which is in some ways a good thing. But at the same time, they haven't done well. That's like the kind of... I feel like, okay, so there was all this energy when Casey Schmidt first got called up. He was kind of the first. I guess technically Sabol was the first, and he had a big game, which we'll get into in a little bit. But there was all this energy, and Casey Schmidt was the first young player to get this opportunity, and then I think it was Patrick Bailey, and then Luis Matos. And there was all this talk about how much energy they had provided, and Schmidt homered in his first game. I believe it was his first game, and then was showing off the arm, and it was just like excitement. And I was talking about it. People were writing about it, like legit journalists were writing about how Giants haven't had a homegrown star in so long, and Casey Schmidt is going to be that guy. But like, pump the brakes. Casey Schmidt has struggled, flat out struggled. Like, the chase issue has persisted, and it's just led to, this is why I say, like, when people are always saying, like, when are they going to hand the team over to the young players? I'm always saying, like, at full strength, the Giants roster didn't have obvious openings for quote unquote young players. But I mean, at the catcher position, there was instability, and I did say that I didn't think Joey Bart was necessarily going to be able to be the answer there. And so that has been the one success, has been Patrick Bailey. And look, I'm not giving up on Luis Matos or Casey Schmidt at all. I'm just saying, if you're trying to compete right now and win right now, it's, I don't want to say better, but when you have proven players like Thairo Estrada, who's now down, and in the outfield, looking at, their full strength outfield being Mitch Haniger and Mike Yastrzemski, platooning with Austin Slater and Michael Conforto. These are all proven players. And what I'm always saying, with a track record, they're productive, and you can kind of bank on that production. Whereas with a Schmidt and with a Matos, you may get it and you may not. And I guess it's also true with veteran players. Like, you weren't getting production out of Mitch Haniger, for example, but that's by the end of the year, you probably would have if he had played a full season. That's just how it is. He's never been below average. And so anyway, but on the flip side, it's, Matos is 21 years old. I want to emphasize and reemphasize that point like a zillion times. I'm not worried about Matos. The plate discipline he's displayed is really impressive. I really like his swing. I think he gets a little bit overrated as a runner. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he can play center. I don't know that he's going to eventually be the long-term center fielder. Maybe he's better suited for a corner, I think, but he's 21 years old. He's the second youngest position player in the major leagues. And so, a little bit of struggle in a little bit of a sample is not the biggest deal. Casey Schmidt, the plate discipline is going to have to improve. But with Thairo Estrada fracturing this hand, Gabe Kapler said they are still in the information gathering phase. And so they don't have like an exact timetable, but that their, current thinking is that it's 4 to 6 weeks. And he said maybe a little sooner. So, a good thing that you get the All-Star break mixed in. So there's 4 games or so that don't happen during that period. Thairo Estrada, by the way, I mean, he had really been scuffling at the plate over the last period, but so just overall a 108 weighted runs created plus, just a little bit above league average offensively. But, 18 stolen bases. I don't believe, I should really know this, but that weighted runs created plus is factoring in stolen bases at all. I think it's just kind of at the plate, not what you do on the bases. And so having 18 steals in 22 tries has added to the value. Estrada's been one of the best base runners in the game, and he's also done really well defensively. And I'm going to take a victory lap on this. A lot of people were acting like he was a bad defender, and I said all offseason, I have no reason to believe he's a bad defender. People were just kind of overreacting, I think, to one little blip of a season in defensive runs saved last year when he was at minus 12. But it seemed like an outlier. And sure enough, this year he's at plus 5 defensive runs saved, plus 11 outs above average, just off the charts, kind of good defensively. And so when you add all those things together, he's been one of the better players in the league. I mean, his 2.7 Fangraphs wins above replacement ranks 23rd. It's actually tied with Luis Arraez, who, if you're a batting average freak, you love Luis Arraez. And obviously the season he's having is super impressive, and 388 batting average coming into today, but not a lot of power and much worse defense, much worse base running. And so the overall value, according to Fangraphs, is the same. And, he's, again, 23rd best player in Major League Baseball. This is among qualified players. You don't really need the qualified distinction when you're talking about a counting stat like wins above replacement. But anyway, I digress. It stinks to lose Thairo Estrada. 4 to 6 weeks is better than what we got with Mitch Haniger in terms of the news, and I guess we'll see. But again, you're going to put yourself in a position where it's like Brett Wisely, who was recalled, by the way, and started last night, but tonight it's Casey Schmidt. Maybe it was just Brett Wisely starting because Brandon Crawford was out and Schmidt was at short. And so but neither of those players has produced. And so if they just have kind of a black hole in the lineup at second base, that's a problem. And so coming up later, we'll discuss how they could possibly address that position. But next, we're going to get into this game. The Giants were exhausted after getting to bed maybe at around 5 a.m. and then having a game last night. Logan Webb was fully rested and he pitched a gem, but the Giants lost anyway. How did it happen? And, some actually great performers for the Giants in this game, but overall another loss for the Giants. So coming up, so we'll get into it in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, here we go. We are going to get into the game last night. It was a game that the Giants kind of could have won, but there were definitely some negatives and also some positives. But overall, it's just another loss. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow we are going to be getting into the second game of this series. You got to keep grinding here as the All-Star break is right around the corner. Keaton Winn is going to make his second career start. I'm quite high on Keaton Winn. If he can do what he did in Toronto in his last outing, then, this guy has a chance to stick in that starting rotation, which the Giants kind of need desperately at this point. Logan Gilbert, really good pitcher for the Mariners going. And they play the Mariners at 1:35 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the game last night, basically, they squandered a gem by Logan Webb, who went 6 2/3, allowed 2 earned runs, 7 hits, 2 walks, 11 strikeouts. And so Logan Webb kind of rebounding in the strikeout department has been one of the many positives this season for the Giants. But 2 years ago in 2021, the breakout season for Webb, he struck out 26.5% of batters. Last year, it fell to 20.7%, so a pretty big drop. And look, the overall numbers were still really good. In fact, his ERA was even better last year than it was the year before. But, I wanted to see a rebound in the strikeout department, and we've seen it. He's at 24.8%, so closer to 2021 levels than last year. And, games like that where he's going out there and striking out 11 are just super impressive. And he allowed, the first run that he allowed was kind of Blake Sabol's fault, to be perfectly frank about it. There was a pass ball that moved a runner to third with less than 2 outs, and then there was a wild pitch that should have been blocked. And so anytime the ball bounces, they're going to call it a wild pitch, but it was kind of right in front of Sabol, and he tried to backhand it instead of going to the traditional blocking form. Kruko's always, harping on the one knee down style, and I get it, but if you look around the game, every single catcher kind of catches that way. Maybe here and there there are some who don't, but that's just the way it is. But Sabol, if you look at the numbers on Baseball Savant, they have really good kind of catcher numbers, like framing and blocking and pop times and all that kind of stuff. And Sabol does well at framing, and I think his pop times aren't the best, but where he's really struggled is kind of in this blocks above average number. And so it doesn't surprise me. I don't think pass balls are included there. And pass balls are typically, they don't bounce. And so it's not a block. But what tends to be what Sabol did in this pass ball was that he was trying to frame it. And he had to yank his arm way across his body to get the pitch, which I guess missed the location, and he's trying to pull it back into the zone. but you got to catch it first. And he's had a problem. And like, to his credit, he's kind of not a natural catcher. And the Giants are just kind of putting him in that position. And I guess they believe it's kind of worth the occasional pass ball to get his bat, instead of what else are you going to do, right? You're going to send this guy, you can't send him down. And so anyway, he made up for it though. I just want to say, like, just to kind of recap this game. Yes, Logan Webb was excellent. Gave up another run in the top of the 7th that he was really upset about. He allowed a couple straight hits, one to Colton Wong at the bottom of the lineup. I think that's the one that ticked him off the most. And then to J.P. Crawford. And then, did that itself tie the game? I don't remember, but he was not happy about it. But I want to mention Blake Sabol, who had the pass ball on the wild pitch, and then in the very next inning, he comes up with a runner on and 2 outs, and he gets himself into a quick 0-2 count, definitely a 2-strike count. And he, as we've seen a lot from him, and we saw later in the game, he just kind of like, he might swing and miss like early in an at-bat or something, but he'll step out, he'll regroup, he'll focus up, and kind of he just has the mentality for those types of kind of big situations where he believes in himself and he's confident and he's not overwhelmed, and he can just kind of refocus. And he did that, and he hit a home run to dead center field off of a pitcher who otherwise kind of dominated the Giants. And then he did it again in the 9th after Camilo Doval, in a tie game, ends up giving up 4 runs in the 9th. It was just a disastrous inning. And I guess there's some people who are blaming some of the stolen bases that the Mariners had in that 9th on Blake Sabol and not having Patrick Bailey back there. But those bases were all stolen off of Camilo Doval. Doval had trouble just in general in this outing. And specifically, he wasn't holding on runners well. And his deliveries weren't the quickest to the plate. Like, these guys were getting, the guy who stole 3rd got just a running lead. He was like halfway to 3rd by the time Doval was, not even ready to throw. It was just like there was no chance to get him. And so anyway, the inning just spiraled out of control on Doval, who gave up 4 earned runs. It's funny, just yesterday I was saying he's really good, but he's not going to have an ERA in the low or in the high 1s. I don't know if I said this, but the peripherals kind of suggested something more in the mid to high 2s. I think I did say that. And sure enough, like 1 outing later, his ERA sits at 2.77, which I think is more kind of appropriate. And it's funny how that can just happen in a flash. So hopefully, it's the first time in a while we've seen something like that from Doval. And 4 runs in the 9th, and you're down 6-2. But the Giants battled back and ended up putting up a 3 spot in the 9th off of a really good closer. And once again, it was Blake Sabol with the big hit, and in the same kind of situation where he really kind of regrouped after falling behind in an 0-2 count and 2 outs. It was like exactly the same, and the home run went to center field again. So Blake Sabol, he hit a home run in the finale in New York, and so he's hit 3 home runs in his last 2 games. He didn't even start that game in New York. So that's great to see. I think it's clear why they like Blake Sabol offensively, and he's working. He's doing the best he can behind the plate, and getting that kind of offense out of your catcher spot, it made up for it. He was responsible for like 5 of the runs the Giants scored, and so it more than made up for the mistakes he made behind the plate. So anyway, all in all, though, it was just another Giants loss, and those have been a little bit too frequent here lately. They lost their last game at home before heading out on the road, and then they lost 2 straight series on the road, and then they lose their first game coming back. So I believe that's 2-6 in their last 8 games. And so what is the big picture? Where are the Giants in the playoff position? And what is, in terms of the trade deadline, are there any other needs now? We were talking about starting pitching, but suddenly you're losing position players as well. So we'll talk about all of that in just a second. But first, All right, as promised, we are going to get into the big picture. Where are the Giants in the standings? They've fallen as they've gone 2-6 in their last 8 games. They've got another tough matchup today with Logan Gilbert for the Mariners on the mound. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow we will be breaking down Keaton Wynn's second career start, going up against a tough pitcher. His ERA, Logan Gilbert, a little deceptive at 4.19. He's good, and the peripherals, everything suggests he's better than a 4.19 ERA, and so this could be another guy who kind of lulls the Giants lineup to sleep, which has happened far too much lately. The Giants play the Mariners today at 1:35 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the big picture, there are some games going on as I record this, and already today the Reds have won again. And so I'm watching all these games. I'm already in like total scoreboard watching mode. And with the loss and coupled with yesterday a Reds win and a Milwaukee Brewers win, I wanted to say Baltimore Orioles, Brewers win, the Giants and Brewers and Reds all had the same record, and the Brewers and Reds being tied atop that National League Central. And so one of them's going to be in first, and whoever else would be a wild card team at this moment in time. And the Giants fell to, they're now a game and a half behind the Dodgers, and they're 4 games behind the Diamondbacks. And the Marlins won again, and some of these teams, they're just having like miraculous win after miraculous win. And that's probably how it felt watching the Giants when they were on that 10-game winning streak, is they were also having miraculous wins. And so it feels like unfair as I'm watching these. I can't believe what the Reds are doing, for example, but it happens. And so anyway, the Reds already played again today, and they already won again today. It's just unbelievable what they're doing. And all of these teams, by the way, the Reds have a minus 15 run differential. They've been outscored on the season. And normally when you're outscored, you're not 8 games over 500. It kind of doesn't add up. And the Brewers, same thing. They've been outscored by 14 runs on the season, and yet they're 7 games over 500. The Marlins are 12 games over 500, and they've been outscored by 21 runs. And so sooner or later, and the last I checked, the Marlins were winning big in their game that's already underway. And so it looks like another Marlins win is inevitable. And so sooner or later, I expect these teams that have these negative run differentials to kind of come down to earth a little bit, but it hasn't happened lately. These teams have been red hot and showing no signs of slowing down. The Giants, meanwhile, have the same record as, coming into today as the Reds and Brewers, who have been outscored on the season. And the Giants have outscored their opponents by 35 runs, which is one of the best in the National League. And that has an expected record of 46-39, and their actual record is 46-39. So the Giants are performing like you would expect. So why can't they have a 7-game overperformance? And there's a tendency to say like, oh, it's because the bullpen management or something like that. But I think it's just kind of random, to be frank and fair and honest. And you'll see it in a given year where some team has this great record in 1-run games, and then the next year they totally do not, and it's the same manager. And so it's just, sometimes that's what's behind this. Like the Marlins record in 1-run games is 20-5. And I believe yesterday was another 1-run game. Cincinnati's record in 1-run games, 19-15. Milwaukee's is 14-5. The Giants are 10-10. Dodgers are 9-10. Diamondbacks are 11-10. And so it's not just, it's not it's not a repeatable thing. The Texas Rangers, if you want to go, oh, it's Kapler, they don't thrive in 1-run games. What about the Texas Rangers, managed by Bruce Bochy? They are 5-12 in 1-run games. 5-12, much worse than the Giants. And I don't take any. I mean, that team is 50-35, and yet they're 5-12 in 1-run games. So anyway, I think it's just kind of random. And on Fangraphs, which I believe is accounting for the Reds winning again, the Giants' playoff odds are down to 62.6%. They were up around 75% just a few days ago. And so it's fallen quite a bit. And so they need to kind of stabilize here and get a win or two specifically, I mean, if you can win this series against the Mariners and then go into that off day at home and then a series against the Rockies at home, you'd be in good shape. But just don't let this spiral. Don't get swept at home by the Mariners. So every game is big right now going into the All-Star break, and they need to kind of get back to their winning ways. And they, with that win, the Reds moved into first place. So the Giants are still clinging to a tie in the wild card with the Brewers, and the Phillies are one back. And then beyond that, you've got the Pirates at 6.5 back, the Padres and Cubs at 7 back, Mets at 7.5 back. So it's really just the Brewers, Phillies to kind of worry about right now, and the Reds, and the Marlins 2.5 games above the Giants, Dodgers 1.5. But yeah, so the Giants are still okay, but their position has worsened, definitely. And then in terms of the trade deadline, yes, I think this is why I'm always saying when there's questions in mailbag episodes about what are the Giants' biggest needs, what are they going to do, you've got to wait till it comes because things can open up. And right now, I don't feel nearly as good as I did about the offense, given all the injuries that they've had. And the fact that these young players, while I believe in them and I certainly hope for their success, you're trying to win this season, and some of these guys just haven't produced. And so do you kind of fill a hole with somebody else at some point? It's definitely not out of the question that they could need to add on the position player side by the trade deadline, and we'll see ultimately what they do. Anyway, thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers tomorrow, like I said, Keaton Winn making his second MLB start. He was good in his last one. We'll be breaking it down tomorrow. Can the Giants get back on track and even up this series? Giants play the Mariners today at 1:35 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Happy 4th of July. Enjoy the game. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.